He has been famous for 65 years. Not famous in the way actors become famous after a breakthrough role in their 20s or 30s. Famous since he was a child actor under contract to Walt Disney himself. Famous through 6 full decades of American popular culture across genres that have nothing to do with each other: Disney family comedies, science fiction, Western, action, prestige drama, without ever becoming the kind of star whose personal life eclipses the work. Kurt Russell has done something that almost no one else in American film has managed. He has remained one of the most recognizable and beloved actors in the country for 65 consecutive years without anyone fully agreeing on what exactly makes him a star. He has never won an Academy Award. He has rarely been the subject of the kind of award season campaign that defines most serious acting careers. He has spent decades being underrated by exactly the critical apparatus that decides who gets called great, and has spent those same decades building one of the most quietly substantial bodies of work in American film. Almost as if the underrating itself were the condition under which he did his best work. And underneath all of it is a private life, a 39-year relationship with one woman that the Hollywood marriage industrial complex has never been able to explain, let alone replicate, that may be the single most countercultural thing Kurt Russell has ever done in an industry built on serial reinvention. Have you ever been good at something for so long, so consistently, that the consistency itself became invisible, that people stopped noticing the achievement because the achievement never announced itself as one? That is the specific situation of Kurt Russell's entire career. And the story underneath it is more interesting than the awards he never won. It is 1966, the Walt Disney Studios lot, Burbank, California. Kurt Russell is 15 years old. He has already been a working actor for 6 years since he was 9, when his father, the actor and former minor league baseball player Bing Russell, got him his first role. He has appeared in dozens of television episodes. He is, by any reasonable measure available to a 15-year-old, already a veteran. Walt Disney himself takes a personal interest in the boy. This is not a minor studio executive noticing a promising young actor in the commissary. This is the founder of one of the most powerful entertainment companies in American history deciding, specifically and by name, that Kurt Russell is going to be the next face of the Disney brand, the heir to the wholesome, all-American leading man persona that had defined Disney's live-action output for a decade. Disney signs him to a personal contract. Not a studio contract, Disney's personal contract, an arrangement so rare that very few actors in the studio's history received one. Walt Disney dies in December 1966. Kurt Russell is 15 years old, and the man who had personally decided what his career was going to be is gone before the plan can fully unfold. This story does not begin on the Disney lot. It begins on a baseball field in El Segundo, California, in a family where the question of what a son was supposed to become had already been answered by a father who knew exactly what he wanted, and where Kurt Russell would spend the rest of his life quietly, persistently, and almost without anyone noticing, answering that question differently than expected. Pull back far enough from the decades of films and the underrated reputation and the relationship that has outlasted nearly every Hollywood marriage of its era, and you find the beginning. The actual beginning, with its specific combination of paternal ambition, genuine talent, and the particular freedom that comes from growing up inside an industry that never quite knew what to do with you. Kurt Vogel Russell was born on March 17, 1951, in Springfield, Massachusetts, and grew up primarily in California. His father, Bing Russell, had played minor league baseball before becoming a character actor, most notably as Deputy Clem Foster on the television series Bonanza for more than a decade. Bing Russell understood show business from the inside its mechanics, its demands, its specific opportunities for a child with genuine talent, and he understood baseball with the same intimacy, having lived inside both worlds long enough to know exactly what each one required and what each one cost. He wanted his son to have both. This was not the casual ambition of a parent hoping a child might be good at multiple things. Bing Russell built, deliberately and with real intention, an upbringing designed to develop his son simultaneously as a serious athlete and a working professional actor too, pursuits that most families would treat as competing for the same finite hours of childhood. And that Bing Russell treated instead as complementary disciplines, each one reinforcing the other. Kurt Russell was, by every account, a genuinely gifted athlete. He played baseball seriously, with the kind of skill that suggested a professional career was a realistic possibility rather than a childhood fantasy. He was also simultaneously working as a professional actor from the age of 9, appearing in television westerns, family films, and eventually the Disney contract that Walt Disney himself had arranged. The dual-track athlete and actor, simultaneously and seriously from childhood, produced in Kurt Russell a quality that would define his entire career: an almost complete absence of precious self-regard about the craft of acting. He did not come from the theatrical tradition that treats acting as a sacred art form, the tradition that produces actors who speak about their characters with a reverent vocabulary of psychological excavation. He came from the world of his father's show business as work, as a trade you developed competence in through repetition, the same way you developed competence in baseball through repetition. You showed up. You did the reps. You got better because getting better was the job, not because you were having a spiritual experience about it. He has said across decades of interviews that he has never thought of himself as having range in the way that critics use the term that he thinks of himself, instead as someone who shows up, does the work, and tries to be honest in the moment rather than impressive in the abstract. This is not false modesty. It is a genuinely different theory of what acting is for, inherited from a father who treated performance as a trade rather than an art, and who passed that orientation to his son with the same matter-of-fact confidence he brought to everything else, including the years he spent driving his son to both baseball practice and studio auditions in the same week, treating neither as more sacred than the other. Have you ever been given, by a parent, not a specific career path, but an entire orientation toward work itself, a way of understanding what effort means and what it's for, that turned out to matter more than any individual choice you made afterward? That is what Bing Russell gave his son. Not a plan, a posture, and the posture turned out to be durable in ways the plan never could have been. The plan, such as it was, ended with Walt Disney's death in 1966. The personal contract that was supposed to make Kurt Russell the next great Disney leading man became, instead, a contract administered by a company in transition, run by executives who had not personally chosen him and who did not share Walt's specific vision for what Kurt Russell was supposed to become. He fulfilled the contract. He appeared in a string of Disney comedies through the late 1960s and early 1970s, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, The Barefoot Executive, Now You See Him, Now You Don't, that were commercially successful and that established him to an entire generation of American children as exactly the wholesome leading man Walt Disney had envisioned. He was also, throughout this period, still seriously pursuing baseball. He played minor league baseball for the California Angels organization in the early 1970s, batting well enough to suggest the possibility of a major league career, before a shoulder injury during a collision at second base effectively ended the athletic path. The injury was not a minor setback he simply played through. It was the kind of injury that closes a door permanently, a torn rotator cuff sustained in a violent collision while turning a double play. The specific physical cost of an athlete who played the game without holding anything back, because holding back had never been part of the orientation his father gave him. This is the part of Kurt Russell's story that gets compressed, in most accounts, into a footnote: the baseball career that didn't happen, mentioned briefly before moving on to the films that did. But the choice to seriously pursue professional baseball while simultaneously being a working Disney contract actor deep into his 20s reveals something specific about how Kurt Russell has always approached his own career. as a set of options to be pursued seriously and simultaneously, rather than a singular identity to be protected and managed. He did not need acting to be his entire identity. This turned out to be the single most important fact about his eventual career. When the baseball injury closed that path, he returned fully to acting, but not as a Disney leading man chasing a vision that had died with its architect. He returned as someone willing to take the kinds of risks that a less secure actor, one whose entire sense of self depended on a single successful persona, would have been too afraid to take. The loss of baseball, paradoxically, freed him. He no longer had a second identity to fall back on, which meant he no longer needed acting to conform to anyone else's expectation of what it should look like. He played Elvis Presley in a 1979 television movie, a performance so technically accomplished that it is still regarded, more than 4 decades later, as one of the finest screen portrayals of Presley ever filmed, better, by the assessment of many critics, than several theatrical attempts that came with vastly larger budgets and more prestigious billing. He then made the decision that fully separated him from the Disney persona. He began working, repeatedly and by choice, with director John Carpenter. There is a version of Kurt Russell's career that the industry has always found comfortable to summarize. The Disney kid who grew up to be a reliable action star, the guy from Tombstone and Backdraft and Stargate, a dependable presence rather than a serious artist. That version misses almost everything interesting about what he actually did. The Carpenter collaborations Escape from New York in 1981, The Thing in 1982, Big Trouble in Little China in 1986 were not commercial slam dunks at the time of their release. The Thing, now widely regarded as one of the finest horror films ever made, was a significant box office disappointment on release, overshadowed by E.T., and dismissed by contemporary critics as excessively grim and unpleasant. A film that critics at the time accused of nihilism for its refusal to offer any reassuring resolution. Big Trouble in Little China, now a cult classic studied for its genre-blending audacity, was also a commercial failure on release, baffling audiences who didn't know what to make of a film that refused to settle into a single genre. Kurt Russell kept making these films anyway, not because they were guaranteed hits, but because he believed in the specific, strange, genre-bending vision that John Carpenter was pursuing, and because he was, fundamentally, more interested in doing interesting work than in protecting a commercially safe persona. The relationship between Russell and Carpenter was built on a specific trust. Carpenter understood that Russell would commit completely to roles that other established actors would have considered career risks. And Russell understood that Carpenter was one of the few directors willing to let him work against the grain of the wholesome persona Disney had spent a decade building. This is the quality that the awards apparatus has never quite known how to honor. An actor who consistently chose interesting failure over safe success across an entire career, and who turned out to be right often enough that the films initially dismissed as failures are now taught in film schools and cited as foundational works of their genres. He was never nominated for an Academy Award. Not for Silkwood in 1983, where his supporting performance held its own against Meryl Streep and Cher in a film that received multiple nominations elsewhere. Not for Tombstone in 1993, where his portrayal of Wyatt Earp is, by wide critical consensus among Western enthusiasts, one of the definitive performances of the genre's modern era, a performance built on a specific, controlled intensity that several critics have noted is genuinely difficult to achieve and that Russell makes look effortless, which may be precisely why it has never been fully recognized. The effortlessness was the problem. Awards bodies tend to reward visible effort, the transformation, the accent, the physical alteration, the evident work of acting. Kurt Russell's specific gift was making difficult work invisible, and the industry has a structural blind spot for exactly that kind of achievement. The same quality that made his Elvis performance in 1979 so technically remarkable, the way he disappeared into the physical vocabulary of a man whose every gesture had been studied and parodied for decades. without ever once seeming like he was doing an impression, is the same quality that worked against him in every awards conversation for the rest of his career. Have you ever done something exceptionally well, so well that the difficulty of it disappeared entirely from view, and found that the very completeness of your success became the reason nobody fully registered what you'd accomplished? That is the specific shape of Kurt Russell's critical reputation. Not underrated because the work was lacking. Underrated because the work was too good at hiding its own difficulty. The biggest and most quietly remarkable thing in Kurt Russell's life is not on any film set at all. He met Goldie Hawn in 1968 on the set of the one and only, genuine, original family band when they were both young actors working for Disney. Nothing happened between them then. They were both involved with other people, both still years away from the kind of life experience that would make the eventual relationship work. They reconnected a decade later in 1983 on the set of Swing Shift, both of them already established stars, both of them having been through previous marriages and relationships that had not worked, both of them arriving at the reunion with a clearer sense of what they actually wanted from a partnership. They have never married. In an industry built almost entirely around the public performance of relationship status, the engagement announcements, the wedding spreads, the divorce filings that generate years of tabloid coverage, Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn made a decision early in their relationship that they were not interested in participating in any of it. They have been together, by their own account, for 42 years as of 2025. They have raised children together, including a son, Wyatt Russell, who has become an actor in his own right. And they have maintained, across 4 decades, of being two of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment. A relationship that the tabloid industry has never been able to generate a crisis narrative around, because there has never been a crisis to report. He has spoken about this with the same matter-of-fact quality he brings to discussing his acting career. He has said that marriage felt, to both of them, like an institution that had not served either of them particularly well in their first attempts, and that what they built instead, a long-term, fully committed partnership without the legal and social architecture of marriage, worked precisely because they chose it freely and continuously, rather than treating it as a contractual obligation neither of them had asked to inherit. Hawn has said something similar in her own interviews across the decades, that the absence of a marriage certificate never once made the relationship feel less permanent, and that if anything, the daily choosing was the more honest foundation. This is not a minor footnote to his career. It may be the single most quietly radical thing about Kurt Russell, a man who built a 65-year career on never needing the industry's full approval to know what he was doing was working, applying that exact same logic to his private life, and proving, across 4 decades, that it was possible to build something durable without anyone else's validation of the form it took. What Kurt Russell built across 6 decades, when you actually account for it rather than summarize it, is one of the most genuinely diverse and quietly substantial filmographies in American cinema. The Disney films that made him a household name to an entire generation of children. The Elvis performance that remains a benchmark. The Carpenter collaborations that were commercial failures and are now considered classics. Tombstone, regarded by many as the finest Western performance of its era. Backdraft, where he brought genuine physical conviction to a firefighting drama that could easily have collapsed into melodrama in less careful hands. Stargate, a science fiction film that built an entire television franchise on the strength of its premise. The Hateful Eight, where Quentin Tarantino specifically sought him out decades into his career. Because Tarantino understood something about Kurt Russell's specific quality that the broader industry had been undervaluing for 30 years, the ability to anchor an ensemble with a presence that never needs to announce itself as the center of attention while somehow always being. Exactly that. Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2, where he played Ego with a charisma that reminded an entirely new generation, raised on superhero franchises, why audiences had been drawn to him since 1966. Few actors in American film history have moved this fluidly across this many genres for this many decades, while remaining, across all of it, recognizably and consistently themselves. He has never reinvented himself in the way the industry usually rewards the dramatic transformation, the calculated image overhaul. He has simply kept working, kept choosing the interesting risk, and let the body of work accumulate its own argument over time. The central irony of Kurt Russell's career is this: an actor whose specific gift was making extraordinarily difficult work look effortless spent 65 years being systematically undervalued by an industry that rewards visible struggle while quietly building a body of work that the same industry now studies, teaches, and increasingly recognizes as some of the most significant American film and television of its eras. He never needed the recognition to know the work was good. This is, in the end, the same quality that let him build a 42-year relationship without ever needing anyone else's permission for the form it took. In 2026, Kurt Russell is 74 years old. He continues to work selectively, choosing projects with the same instinct for interesting risk over safe predictability that has defined his entire career. He remains with Goldie Hawn, the two of them having long since become a kind of quiet proof that Hollywood relationships do not require the industry's standard, architecture, to last a couple who have outlasted nearly every marriage. Among their generation of Hollywood contemporaries without ever needing the legal designation that those marriages relied on. He has in recent years spoken with increasing directness about his father, Bing Russell, about the specific gift of being raised by a man who treated performance as honest work rather than sacred art, and about how much of his own approach to a 6-decade career traces directly back to that early orientation. He has spoken about John Carpenter with the warmth of someone who understands, in retrospect, exactly what those collaborations were worth, even when the box office did not initially agree. And he has watched with evident satisfaction as an entire generation of younger filmmakers and critics has rediscovered The Thing in Big Trouble in Little China and recognized them as the genuinely significant work they always were. He watched his son Wyatt build his own acting career, and he has spoken about that with the same unsentimental pride he brings to discussing his own work, pleased, but not precious about it, treating his son's success the way his own father treated his, as evidence of good work rather than as a story to be dramatized. He has never campaigned for an Academy Award. He has never seemed to need one. When interviewers raise the subject, he tends to redirect the conversation toward the work itself rather than toward what the work was denied a habit that is, itself, a continuation of his father's orientation. The work is the point, and the recognition, if it comes, is incidental. There is something quietly remarkable about that a man who has been one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment for 65 years. Who built one of the genre-spanning filmographies in American film, who chose a 42-year partnership over a single legal marriage and made it work without anyone's permission, and who has never once needed the industry's full validation to know that what he built was substantial. Kurt Russell's story is not a story about Hollywood. It is not a story about Academy Awards he never received or box office numbers from films that failed on release and succeeded decades later. It is a story about what it means to do consistently excellent work for 65 years without the validation that usually accompanies excellence, and to build, alongside that work, a private life constructed entirely on your own terms, refusing the institutional architecture that everyone around you assumes is necessary and proving, slowly and undeniably, that it wasn't. It is a story about the specific freedom that comes from never needing anyone else's framework, not the studios, not the awards bodies, not the marriage industries, to know what you've built is real. What have you built that nobody has fully recognized, not because it wasn't good, but because it was good in a way the usual measurements weren't designed to see? And what would it mean to keep building it anyway, the way Kurt Russell did for 65 years, without waiting for anyone's permission? Leave that in the comments. Because that question isn't about acting. It's about every quietly excellent thing you've built that the world hasn't gotten around to noticing yet. If this story moved something in, you leave a like. 1 second. It means this reaches someone who's been quietly building something real without the recognition to match it. Subscribe. More stories like this are coming people who built something lasting without needing anyone's approval for the form it took. And tell me in the comments, what's the one thing from Kurt Russell's story you're taking with you? Because the most important role he ever played was not on any film set. It was the 42 years he spent proving that you can build something permanent without anyone else's blueprint. He never needed the contract. He just needed the choosing. Every single day. We'll be back.